You sit here not because you're broken, but because you're seeking to understand why the same fire keeps returning to consume you. And so, I must begin with a truth few are willing to speak. Addiction is not your enemy, it is your messenger. It has not come to destroy your life, though it may do so if ignored. It has come to bring something up from the depths of your unconscious, something your conscious mind has not yet been willing to face. The psyche is not a faulty machine. It is a living system, and when it suffers, it does not do so by accident. An addict, whether drawn to alcohol, heroin, sex, perfection, or power, is not merely caught in a destructive habit. They are, often unknowingly, trying to solve a deeper issue within the soul. Let's be direct. Addiction is not weakness. It is a misdirected search for wholeness, for something sacred, something eternal, something that has been lost. I have seen this time and again. People come to me in anguish, overwhelmed by compulsions they don't understand and cannot control, and society tells them to just stop. But that's like telling someone to just fly. The compulsion is not a decision, it is a signal. It reflects a deeper split within the self. At the core of addiction lies the shadow, the part of you that has been exiled, the part that your ego has deemed unacceptable, the part you were taught to suppress in order to cope. But the shadow does not disappear. It waits, and it speaks through dreams, through symptoms, through behaviors, and through suffering. When you drink, inject, or obsess, you're not just fleeing from pain. You're being drawn, pulled by something ancient, unresolved. Some neglected part of you is starving, and now it devours whatever it can reach. Here is the deeper truth. You are not addicted to the substance. You are addicted to the feeling it gives you, or more precisely, to the part of yourself it allows you to silence. The alcoholic does not crave alcohol. They crave forgetting, the silence of guilt, the quieting of the inner critic, the relief from the unbearable pressure of being themselves. So understand, your behavior is only the surface. Beneath it lies a sacred question. What part of you is crying out to be seen? I've said before, and I'll say again, every addiction is an unconscious attempt at transformation. The addict is seeking growth, but without direction, without ceremony, and without meaning. The path, then, turns destructive. They are not simply trying to escape, they are trying to transcend. To feel something eternal, even if briefly. To dissolve the ego's pain in imagined relief. This is why I once told a colleague, you are trying to cure the spiritual thirst of a person with methods that deny them access to the divine. You may laugh, but consider this. The Latin word for alcohol is spiritus. The same root word as spirit. The same word used in sacred rituals and on bottles of poison. This is no coincidence. The alcoholic is reaching for spirit, for connection with the divine without realizing it. That is why addiction cannot be healed by removing the substance alone. You must replace the false ritual with a true one. You must give the soul something meaningful, something real, something sacred. I am not speaking of religious doctrine. I am speaking of the individuation process, the deep, inner journey through which a person becomes whole. You must descend into your own darkness, confront your inner wounds, and recover what has been forgotten. Addiction is a failure of integration. It is the psyche's cry for unity. The ego and the unconscious are in conflict. The conscious mind tries to control, to suppress, to explain away, but the unconscious refuses to be dismissed. It will emerge through dreams, through symptoms, through behavior, and sometimes through addiction. The addict is often someone with a rich inner life, someone with immense energy hidden inside. But that energy has not been welcomed. It has been shamed, denied, and pushed aside. And so, it turns inward against them. You cannot fight the shadow by repressing it. You must engage with it. You must invite it in. Learn what it needs, what it fears, and what it is trying to teach you. There's a common myth that healing is about becoming better. It isn't. Healing is about becoming whole. And wholeness includes what is broken, what was hidden, what was left behind. So, when someone tells me they cannot stop drinking, I don't ask, why are you so weak? I ask, what strength does this drink give you? What part of you feels so unmet that only oblivion seems safe? This is the truth few are prepared to hear. Addiction is not random. It is not meaningless. It is not just chemical. It is a map. The symptom points to the wound. The wound leads to the story, and the story reveals the soul's unfinished work. Understand, The unconscious, is not just personal, it is archetypal. It holds patterns older than language. Themes of exile, return, fall, and rebirth. The addict is unknowingly living out a mythic story. They are lost in the underworld, seeking light, and they cannot return until they understand the force that drew them down. In ancient cultures, someone who behaved like an addict would be taken to a priest, a healer, a sacred ritual. Today, they are placed in jail or worse, left alone with their shame. This is a tragedy, because addiction is a spiritual crisis. It is the soul's way of saying, I need help, and the ego's way of saying, I don't want to feel this pain. But someone must listen. Someone must respond. Because without truth, there can be no healing. And here is that truth. You will not overcome your addiction until you face what it's shielding you from. You must go into the pain. You must grieve the loss. You must stand before your own abyss, not to fall in, but to understand what calls from its depths. And again, the paradox, what you fear most within yourself may be the source of your freedom. The part you've rejected, the wound you carry, these may be the very places where your soul will grow. If given the chance, you cannot silence the unconscious. You can only listen and allow its messages to be received. Addiction is one such message. And once it is heard, something changes, but not before. Know this, the psyche is always working to heal, even when its movements look destructive, even when it seems headed toward collapse. It is still underneath, striving for wholeness. But when the conscious mind denies this process, the path becomes dark, twisted, and at times dangerous. Addiction, then, becomes the ritual of the shadow, a corrupted rite of passage, acted out alone, without meaning, without witness. Addiction often begins in silence and isolation. In ancient societies, young men and women were led through formal rites of initiation. They encountered symbols of death, endured trials, and faced darkness that dismantled their egos, not to destroy them, but to rebuild them into something greater than their wounds. Today, we lack this guidance. The modern person still suffers, but finds no symbolic map, number, narrative structure, no holding container. So the psyche creates its own initiation, but without awareness, without support, and without meaning. This is where addiction arises. The addict becomes a self-initiating, guided, and unprepared. And that, perhaps, is the most dangerous path of all. So, what can be done? You must either become your own guide or find someone who knows the way. And you must turn inward, especially into your dreams. Because dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. They do not lie. They reveal in symbol what the conscious mind avoids. Addiction may appear in dreams as a beast, a bottomless pit, or a stranger offering poison. This is not insanity, it is the soul speaking in the only language it has left. A man once came to me, unable to stop gambling. He had lost his home, his family, nearly his life. And in his dreams, he was always at a table, cards in hand, money vanishing, always alone. And behind him, always behind him, stood his father, silent, watching. We didn't treat the behavior. We worked with the dream. And what he uncovered was not a craving for money, but for approval, for love, for a word of acceptance that never came. The casino had become his temple, a place where he unconsciously hoped to be chosen. This is what you must understand. Addiction is symbolic. It is not just about the behavior, it's about what that behavior represents. Until the symbol is understood, the compulsion remains. You may suppress one addiction, but if the wound is not seen, another will rise in its place, because the psyche will not rest until the hidden pain is acknowledged. Let me repeat, the wound must be witnessed, not judged, not shamed, not analyzed until it disappears, but seen. When light enters a long dark room, the shadows do not vanish instantly. They resist, they react, but in time, with care, they integrate. And so it is with the shadow within. You don't overcome addiction by force. You integrate the part of yourself that was using it to survive. Yes, to survive. The ego is a master of survival. When the soul can't carry the weight of what it has endured, the ego builds defenses. These can be habits, compulsions, yes, even addictions. But always, they are meant to protect something innocent within. So let me ask plainly, who in you is using this addiction to survive? Is it the child, an orphaned emotion, The rage no one allowed you to express? The grief no one helped you carry? Who is crying beneath the behavior? When you can answer that, your real journey begins. You might then ask, if I stop, if I remove the addiction, what fills the space it leaves behind? And this is perhaps the hardest part, the void, the silence, the place where pain rushes back. But let me say clearly, the void is not your enemy. It is the womb, the beginning of transformation. The void is where the ego dissolves, where the identity, built on avoidance, begins to fall away. And in that silence, something deeper, the true self, starts to emerge. Make no mistake, the ego is not the self. The ego is who you think you are. The self is who you are, whole, timeless, expansive. The ego resists change. The self requires it. The ego clings to the addiction. The self can use even addiction as a doorway to awakening. I've seen it many times. Someone arrives lost, exhausted, ashamed, and yet within them, a quiet ember burns, a whisper from the self saying, there's more for you than this. That whisper, that hope, is what brings them. Not their suffering, their hope. Hope is not naive. It is archetypal. It's part of the soul's deep knowing that even the darkest night contains a hidden dawn. But that dawn cannot arrive until the night is faced, not avoided, not medicated, not bypassed by logic. Face. That is what the addict must do. Not just abstain but descend, not suppress but investigate, not run but listen. Listen to what? To the voice within, the one silenced by shame, the one that remembers who you were before the wound, the one that still knows you are worthy of healing. You might think this is poetic language, but the psyche speaks in poetry. It speaks in metaphor, symbol, myth, and dream. If you don't learn this language, you'll never understand what your suffering is trying to reveal. So let me be clear, as though you were sitting in front of me. If you're addicted, I'm not asking what you're doing. I'm asking, what pain are you avoiding? What truth are you afraid to know? What part of you still believes it is unworthy of love? These are not casual questions. They are sacred. They are the keys to the inner room where your soul has been waiting for you to return. And when you return, when you meet yourself honestly, with grief and forgiveness, the addiction begins to loosen its grip. Not because you battle it, but because you listen to what it was protecting. The psyche heals through contact, conscious contact with the unconscious. That is the way forward. And so, I'll leave you with this. You do not need to fear your darkness. You only need to meet it. And when you do, when you greet your shadow as a teacher, not a threat, you may realize something profound. Your addiction was not a curse. It was a calling. A calling you are now finally ready to answer. You've begun to understand that healing is not about brute resistance. It's about sacred dialogue with the self, the real self, the one who's waited beneath the noise, the habits, and the avoidance. And now, I must take you even deeper. Because once the shadow has been seen, once the child has spoken, once the grief has been felt and the protector understood, a stillness arrives. And from that stillness, a new figure rises from the unconscious. It is not the old identity. It is not your trauma. It is not the mask you once wore. It is what I have long called the self, the center of the total personality, both conscious and unconscious, the divine image within. This is often misunderstood. People ask, are you speaking of God? Yes, but not a God of robes and thunder. I speak of the divine image that lives within the psyche. The self is not your ego's fantasy. It's not your perfect version of yourself. It is your whole being, even the pain, even the failure, even what you've tried to forget. And this self has always been trying to reach you through dreams, through symptoms, through the experience of addiction itself. The self does not issue commands. It speaks in symbols. And if those symbols are ignored, they become symptoms. Addiction is one of those symptoms, a sign that something vital has been cut off, left in the dark. So don't just ask, how do I stop? Ask instead, what part of my soul have I abandoned? Because I will tell you something few are willing to say. Addicts are not weaker than others, often. They are more sensitive. They carry deeper emotional range. They feel archetypal energies more strongly. And that is why they suffer. They live in a world that offers them no map, no mirror, no sacred ritual. But now you know, the mirror is within. The map is your dream. The ritual is your turning inward. You must become a participant in your own healing. You cannot be saved from the outside. You must ascend into yourself, that the gods no longer live on mountaintops, that they now live in the unconscious, waiting to be seen. Take the archetype of the wounded healer. This is not metaphor. It is a pattern embedded in the soul. The one who suffers becomes the one who guides, but only if they do not turn away from the wound, only if they face it, learn from it, and offer what they've learned. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. And that choice begins the moment you realize addiction was not a detour. It was part of your path. And now, to you, yes, you can. But understand this clearly. The self that emerges from the fire will not be the same as the one who entered. You cannot return to who you were. That old version of you was built to survive, not to grow. It was too limited. The new self, the integrated self, has space. Space for truth, for beauty, for strength, for vulnerability, and for contradiction. This is the meaning of individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. And this wholeness is not abstract. It is lived. It shows in how you speak to yourself in quiet moments, in how you sit with emptiness without needing to escape it, in how you carry both grief and gratitude at once, in your ability to say I don't know without shame, and in how you move through life not as someone broken, but as someone who sees. There will still be days when the old patterns resurface. This is natural. The unconscious remembers. But now you are aware. Now you recognize the voice when it calls. You no longer mistake the wound for your identity. You can say, I know this pain, but I no longer need it to survive. This is healing, not erasing the past, but transforming your relationship with it. You will begin to dream differently. The symbols will shift. Where there were once monsters, there may now be teachers. Where once you drowned, you now walk with clarity. Dreams are mirrors. And as your inner life changes, so too does what is reflected. Then, quietly, something new begins to form, a sense of purpose. Not something grandiose, not necessarily to be a prophet or healer, though in your own way you may become both, but a call to live with depth, with meaning, and with integrity. Don't keep your healing to yourself. Anyone who's walked through addiction and returned to consciousness carries a rare gift. Not perfection, but understanding. You know what it means to be lost, and now you know what it means to return, not as you once were, but as someone who is still unfolding. You'll recognize others still caught in the cycle, still reaching for substances, still repeating patterns. Don't judge them. They are you, at an earlier time. Offer presence, not superiority. Offer honesty, not instructions. Be the mirror you once needed. Healing does not happen in isolation. We heal through connection with ourselves, with symbols, and with one another. When you share your story, you open the door for others to find theirs. When you speak without shame, you challenge the silence that feeds secrecy. And when you choose to love yourself as you are, you show others that it's possible. Now let me say something that may surprise you. The self, the archetype of wholeness, does not care if you are perfect. It doesn't care whether you relapse, whether you meditate daily, or always say the right things. What the self seeks is presence, that you are awake, that you are honest, that you are listening to your body, to your dreams, to the subtle messages in daily life. A conversation, a moment of emotion, even a bird at the window. These are not meaningless. They are messages. Life is always speaking. The only question is, will you listen? When you begin to live from that place of listening, you become someone else, not driven by fear, not ruled by shame, but moved by meaning. You may not fully grasp it yet, but the journey you've taken from compulsion to awareness is the hero's journey. Yes, yours. You've entered your own underworld. You've faced what frightened you. You've learned its name, and you've returned not as a rescuer, but as one who now knows. And what you know is simple and sacred. You are not broken. You are becoming. What you thought was failure was actually your initiation. Addiction was not the end. It was the dark womb of your beginning. So go now. Live from this understanding. Create from it. Forgive from it. Speak from it. And when the shadow returns, and it will, do not fear it. You now understand its language. And more importantly, you now understand your own. And that is freedom.